You're welcome back. Time for business, and Emmanuel Abouajiri joins us in the studio. Emmanuel,
Hi,
I know you'll come to business in a bit, but I understand the Black Stars are down by a goal in their match against Egypt.
Exactly. I mean, it was such a previous blunder, maybe to put it that way.
Well, let's hope that they equalize before the end of the match. But what's coming up in business?
Well, in business, government is planning to raise 600 million cedis in first of two bonds for the first quarter of the year 2017.
Wow.
All right, thank you very much, and thanks for watching. Government today started engaging investors over its plan to raise some 600 million cedis through a 5-year bond. This will be the first of two long-dated bonds that will be issued for the first quarter of 2017. George Wiafe has more on the impact on rising public debt and the cost of borrowing.
Funds will be raised under a different arrangement instead of the previous ones, which was exclusively done by the Bank of Ghana. The approach will be called the book building and will be handled by 3 institutions, that is Barclays, Stanbic, and Finance House Strategic African Securities, SAS. Already, government has proposed an interest rate is expecting to pay on the funds and also expecting to close this arrangement with investors by tomorrow. The 5-year bond issuance is part of the 17.4 billion cedis being raised through bonds and treasury bills with the first quarter of 2017. Sources close to government say this arrangement was worked on as far back as last year to take care of bonds that are maturing for this year. They maintain it okayed it because they didn't have any problem with this strategy. Joy Business is learning this government to be outlining its borrowing strategy when Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta presents the 2017 budget to Parliament before the middle of March. The 600 million cedis bond is part of the over 17 billion Ghana cedis being raised in the first quarter of this year. However, some are worried about the impact of this bond on the country's rising debt, which has reached 120 billion Ghana cedis as at November 2016, and even the cost of borrowing because of the crowding out effect.
The Danish government says it will fully cut donor aid to Ghana by 2020. The move follows cancellation of aid to Ghana by other donor partners like the EU and UK, citing Ghana's transition to a lower middle-income economy. The Danish ambassador to Ghana, Tav Denkbol, tells Joy Business Denmark will rather consider boosting bilateral trade with Ghana from 2017.
When Ghana obtained middle income status, it was decided that Denmark should gradually phase out our development co.
Sincere apology for the abrupt end of that story. We'll bring it later on in the bulletin. The development could put a lot of pressure on government's revenue because it now has to look at other ways of addressing this expected shortfall income. Earlier on the marketplace, I asked economist Courage Marty what the impact of this very development would be on Ghana's economy and the way forward.
We would have to analyze the impact through the sectors that these funds go to. Okay. And normally these funds tend to go to health, education, agric, and energy. So when it comes to health, for instance, you recall that one of the critical points or selling points in the last election was the fact that the National Health Insurance Scheme is not functioning as it ought to. And one of the main reasons is because of financial challenges, in the payment of claims. And so if you have a donor funding that will be withdrawn now, it sets the government back in its attempt to make that particular sector function very well. Then in the area of energy, we've gotten to the stage where increasing reliance on thermal is one reason why our tariffs are so high. Now, you want to blend that up with not just hydro, but you want to bring in renewable energies like solar and wind. Now, the initial setup cost for this kind of energy is quite high. And so some of these funds tend to go into that area of energy supply. This is an area where the government, again, will have to look for funds to supplement that shortfall. Then you go to education. we know of the capitation grant and the expansion in the access to education and the fact that this government also wants to do free senior high school education. This would have to be funded. Donors are pulling out of those sectors as well. Then it sets a lot of challenge in front of the government that it will have to surmount. So the impact would have to be analyzed through these sectors, then the multiplier effect on the aggregate economy.
All right, so even before we go to the impact, now you would agree with me that even though we've achieved or we've come by this middle income status, for instance, in our energy sector, we still have problems, we still have challenges. We are yet to become self-sufficient in the energy industry. Now, exactly. You don't think that these donor supports could help us, continue to help us in a way, and then gradually go off this support?
Well, yeah, but then they are also looking at the fact that if you put your finances in order, you should be able to, cater for some of these needs. Like, for instance, they think that there are a lot of leakages in the system. We know about how one of the focal points of the IMF program in the first year was to clean the payroll. And so those savings would have to go to critical sectors. So they're expecting you to do some of these savings, efficient utilization of funds so mobilized so that they can then go to those areas. And then they're also expecting you that the generation mix should be such that it is consistent with affordability. You should not just go for availability and sacrifice affordability. So these are the levels that they've seen you've gotten to and should be able to bootstrap and do your own housekeeping.
Former boss of Tema Oil Refinery and former executive chairman of football club Kumasi Asante Kotoko has been appointed as the acting CEO of Ghana National Petroleum Corporation, GNPC. This is, however, subject to the approval of the Council of State. He takes over from Alex Mode, who was appointed to head the corporation in 2013. Joy Business understands he begins work officially at GNPC next Monday. Dr. Sapon recently stepped down as the chief executive chairman of Royal Bank Ghana to concentrate on some private business. Dr. KK Sapon is a chartered accountant and holds a PhD in Industrial and Business Studies from the University of Warwick, Master of Accounting in International Accounting and Finance from the University of Glasgow, and also holds an MBA in Accounting and DSc in Administration and Accounting option from the University of Ghana, Legon. The General Agricultural Workers Union, GAU, is cautioning government on adopting the private-public partnership approach in addressing the funding problem facing the sector. Agric Minister designate Dr. Afiya Kutu says he will be working hard to bring in more private investors to partner government turn around fortunes of the agric sector. But the General Secretary of the GAU, Edward Karewe, says government must tread cautiously.
We also have to be careful that at the end of the day, we are not ripped off of so much going into such an arrangement. We are aware of some of the institutions where, at the end of the day, the returns to the state is just minimal. And eventually, in some of those arrangements, the private sector eventually takes over it. So the arrangement per se is not new. And that's what we've been doing over the years. But we need to appraise it to ensure that we actually achieve the objective that we wanted to achieve. We have to do the PPP, but then we also need to be circumspect and then take it easy, such that we do not eventually hand over our space of control and policy making for the private sector.
And that's it for business. My name is Emmanuel Abuajibia.